Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to a new video series that is connected to our Queering the Bible series that we have been doing every summer. We've queered Mark and the prophets, we queered Acts last year, and now we are queering one of my favorite books of the Bible, Job, and all its complexities and all those things. And so we are very excited to have these interviews with our writers. These videos will be attached alongside all of our writers' pieces that they are providing commentary for each, not all chapters of Job, but some of the chapters of Job. It is a long one, but we are attaching these videos to that so you can get to know our authors and all the wonderful things that they do, and also just a little interview with them. And so we are excited to have the first author of this particular Queering the Bible series, Queering Job. We have Danny with us. And Danny, introduce yourself to all the people out there.
Sure. So, hello, everyone. I'm Danny Morales. I am pastor of New Covenant Presbyterian Church in the South Florida, Miami area. Recently, actually started pastoring a second congregation. So now I'm pastoring a UCC congregation, Miami Shores Community Church. And so I split my time between that and also serve as a wedding pastor for local UCC church as well. Miami native of Cuban descent. My parents migrated from Cuba well over 50 years ago. I was born and raised here, and so Miami is home for me. It is a
Yeah.
pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great. And we were just talking before this about it's already hot there.
It
And,
is
um,
extremely hot indeed, yes.
yeah, well, I'm not jealous of that. I always tell people if they know me, they know the heat and I do not mix very well. And I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and was saying, it's pretty mild for it to be May, late in May and almost June, but the heat here will hit us really hard probably
Oh,
very, very soon.
yeah.
So, and that with humidity, never a fun thing.
No, not at all. Not at
Yeah,
all.
never a fun thing. But we are so grateful that you are writing for us and are on this interview with us. We're really appreciative of it. And so, especially in a time such as this, I wonder what you would say as to, why it's important for us to queer scripture as something that people aren't necessarily always used to.
Mhm.
Unbound has been doing this for the last 4 years, and it is kind of it's not new, but it's something that people might not be familiar with. So when I say queering the Bible, what does that mean to you?
Well, for me, it simply means that viewing scripture and the experiences that are narrated in scripture through the lens of a queer person. It doesn't necessarily mean queering the actual characters. I know for some folks, when they hear that, they might freak out and think, "Oh my God, they're transforming or converting all these guys." No, and we're not doing that at all. It's actually the opportunity to look at scripture through the lens of a person who identifies as queer and their lived experiences and how they see the narratives and the stories of scripture being reflected in some of their own personal lives as well. So that's how I understand it. Um, and I hope other folks will understand that that aspect of it as well.
Yeah. There are some times where I always get there's a lot of comments being made. Yeah, like we're trying to make all these characters queer and we're trying to, and in all honesty, there are some in the Bible that may or may not be. There are some speculative
Absolutely.
things
Hmm.
and there are some characters in the Bible who do very much kind of disrupt the gender norms and the binaries and all those things that we as queer people may can uncover or see better than some other folk.
Right.
But I do wonder when it comes to Job, and Danny is writing about the first chapter of Job, which is a big introduction to the character of Job and just a interesting character in the biblical text that all these things happen to, even though he thinks he is a very devout person of God, and all these bad things start happening to him. But what do you what do you see in Job that really speaks to the queer experience? Like, I wonder if you can, yeah, if you can talk about that a little bit.
Well, so first, let me start by saying that I had not really read much of Job. I was thinking about that these past few weeks because even in seminary, I don't recall that there were ever any elected courses specifically on the Book of Job. There are many mentions of it because of the whole concept of suffering, and you know, it is an interesting the first chapter, just the way it's laid out, to me, has always been puzzling, challenging, and interesting. As you rightly mentioned, the story is about a man who considers himself to be totally upright and righteous and has done all the good things, and then all these bad things start happening to him. Obviously, as you read along in the chapter, you'll realize that the way it is set up or the way these things unfold happens to be a conversation between God and the accuser or Satan. And that's how these things take place. That for me has always been a little challenging. Like, okay, so God is having this wonderful conversation with Satan. Here, try my friend. I think he'll be a great, a great candidate for you to just have at it, do what you must,
Mhm.
right? Um, And throughout the entire experience, the one thing about Job is that even in the midst of all these sufferings, Job voices his discontent, voices the things he is challenged by, but never opts to curse God, never decides or says, I'm walking away from all of this, right? Um, and I got to think about my own personal life and my own coming out story too. I was born and raised in the church. I'm a cradle Christian. I knew at a very young age that I was gay. Um, and I was raised in a Southern Baptist congregation. And there were, I grew up listening to all these sermons about homosexuality and how you're an abomination and, casting off to hell. And at the same time, I wrestled with that because, I thought, okay, well, I don't recall ever choosing these things. This is just naturally happened. This is the way I am. And I still chose to remain faithful to God. Despite all the despite the criticisms, despite the pushback, despite even people, some folks even in my own family telling me that, you need to get yourself right with God, which is not that different than what happens to Job, when we start reading 2nd, 3rd, and onward, where his friends come to him, "Well, Job, you must have done something. It's impossible." Because we associate, the things that happen to us as a punishment from God,
Mm,
when in this particular case, whatever happens to Job is totally beyond Job's control, nothing that Job did. Uh, and sometimes as a queer person, things happen to us, right? And there are many folks, some of them within churches, that are very quick to point and say, well, you need to get yourself right with God. As if that is the cause of the suffering that happens or the experiences that happen in our lives. Uh, I just think that Job gives us the example of a person who lives through these experiences, is certainly not content with it, and is certainly wise to question and to raise and voice his concern. But why? And yet still chooses to remain faithful. I think that's
yeah.
an important lesson for us, as well, because there are things that are bound to happen in our lives way beyond our control. Nothing to do with our personhood, nothing to do with who we are. It's just a matter of this is what happens in life, right? Um, our choice is whether or not we remain faithful to God. Going back to the example I gave earlier of myself, I still chose to remain faithful to God, despite what others in the church might have said about my faith or who I am as a person and whether or not God would accept me. And 30 something years later, here I am serving as a minister in two different congregations. So, yeah, So that's where I'm at with Job.
Yeah, it's an interesting book to kind of to talk about, like, the nuances of fate too. It's not a it doesn't give easy answers, it doesn't give straightforward answers,
No.
it only opens up questions, and I think that that's one of the things that, for me as a queer person and someone who has studied, like, queer theologies and queer theory, that's all about queering things, is to open us up to more questions and to humanize these characters more and more in the way we read the biblical text. Job
Yeah.
went through a lot.
Yeah. He
Job
did.
was
He did.
he went through a lot, and there was this, in many ways, kind of this, like, celestial, heavenly, like, spiritual game that God and the other character play, and kind of trying to test Job in ways, and I think that that's also something that we as queer people have been told too, that this burden has been placed on us to test us, and that we are the only way that we can do that is to, like, suppress ourselves, and whether it be, like, you know, sexuality or what, or gender expression, all those things. And I don't think that that's exactly what we are necessarily called to do, as kind of be this, like, suffering servant model, uh, in a way that denies who God created us to be. And that is something that I think Job offers us too, is to ask those questions
Yeah.
of ourselves and our faith. And so that's also interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something very interesting about Job and most biblical characters through this process of querying scripture, and it is the ability to humanize them. Sometimes, because these characters are found within our sacred text, we want to make them equally as sacred and as holy, not realizing that they are just as imperfect as we have been or as we are. And the scripture narratives are really a peek into how they best understood to live their lives within the context of where they found themselves and how they understood God to be at work in the midst of their own lives, too. One of the fascinating things about Job is he wrestles with these things that happen to him, right? And as I said earlier, he chooses not to curse God. He chooses to remain faithful. But Job teaches us the importance of voicing our discontent. Just because these things happen doesn't mean we have to sit back and accept them. No, we have the capacity and the ability to question, why do these things happen? And I think we're invited to wrestle with that, because in the process of wrestling with why suffering happens, we end up, I'm of the belief that over time we end up uncovering that there is something there for us to, to understand about either ourselves or or God at work in the bigger, grander scheme of things.
Yeah. Well, I also know that during this time, especially in a time such as this, when, our current time in this country, our administration is pretty much attacking the queer and trans community. There's so much hate going on, and one of the reasons why we decided to do the series every summer, because people ask, "Why are you doing it every year?" I'm like, "Why not do it every year?" there
Of
are
course.
there are moments where, queer and trans people of faith have read these devotionals, and I've been told that they've also been very life-saving for people, and it means so much to people, especially right now. But I wonder what you would say right now to our community, in a time such as this.
Oh goodness, there truly is so much going on, and I think that as a community, one of the best ways, or one of the best advices that I could give is the importance of sticking together, of really being uh, uh, this understanding of being in community with one another. I was thinking with my husband, we were out and about a couple of weeks ago and reflecting on everything that's going on in the country. And I thought to myself, I suspect gay clubs uh, are bound to come back to life yet again, because it's the community and it's the space where you are able to just be with one another. I would encourage my queer siblings that find that space that is life giving for you right now, because there are so many things happening. Um, and some of it is beyond our control. We have to acknowledge that. Um, but I think that one of the best ways that we can overcome this, one of the best ways we can survive this time that we've been called to live in, is by sticking close in community with one another and understanding that our call is um, not to bicker with one another, but to uplift and support one another in this particular time more than ever.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, Danny, this has been wonderful, and I am so excited that you are a part of this series and
Thank you.
that you have, yeah, joined this club of people doing this wonderful series that brings me a lot of hope and brings me a lot of joy. And thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you for having me, and I hope the entire series will be life giving for some, for people who really need it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And just so everybody knows, you can find the series at justiceunbound.org. It'll be all over our homepage. And yeah, Danny, thank you again.
Thank you.